Hey guys, for today's training video, I'm going to talk about calculated risks in CSGO. CSGO is a game that is all about making the high percentage plays in order to see consistently good results, but there are downsides to playing it safe. You can become predictable in your play, and you'll lose the X factor ability. But that doesn't mean to say that you should try to play as unpredictable as possible all of the time. There's a very delicate balance you must look to establish where you're not too predictable, but at the same time you're not taking too many risks. Calculated risks are risks that you take to get an edge on an opponent while weighing up the pros and cons of the risk. You need to understand everything about the risk and understand why it's a risk in order to make the decision to take the risk. There are a number of ways you can take calculated risks in CSGO, but I'll highlight the most common or effective calculated risks. Going for aggressive plays at the start of a round, gamble stacking bomb sites, pushing through smokes or early flanking, and risks in clutches. Starting with aggressive plays at the start of the round, there are a few things you want to consider or calculate before deciding to do an aggro play. How is your economy or round lead? If your economy is quite low and your loss bonus isn't high, or you've been winning the previous rounds with only 1 or 2 players alive, then consider taking a safer play. If the aggressive, risky play does not work out in your favor, then you'd be crippling your team and gifting your opponents a multiple round buffer. The times I'd call an aggressive push or play at the start of a round is when we're up by a very large margin, say 14-6, or we're on map point and the other team is yet to take double digits. I have some rounds to play around with, and we have the momentum that making this type of play is acceptable. I'd also call for an aggressive play at the start of a round if my team has a healthy economy, or if we lose the round, we're still capable of full buying with reserve money left over. I'd also call for an aggressive play if we're doing a weird low force or mixed buy, any sort of buy that doesn't involve everyone being on a rifle with full utility, where we can control the close quarter engagements with our running gun weapons. I like to also get in my opponent's face when I know that they're going to be on a low buy, where I can expect that they won't have either the weapons or the utility to stave off an aggressive push. It is also worth it to note what your enemy's economy is. Certain types of pushes are good against a low buying opponent, while other types of pushes are against an opponent on a full buy that might include ops. Knowing your opponent and knowing what type of buy they are on will signal what type of push you would be able to do. Gamble stacking bomb sites is a risk that CTs need to take from time to time. Similarly to aggressive plays at the start of a round, I would mainly do bomb site stacks when you're up large number of rounds and you want to close out the game, but your opponent is crawling back round by round. Instead of losing a few more rounds trying to hold on to your default pattern, take a risk and stack 4 or even 5 players at a bomb site on a gun round to catch your opponents off and close out the game. Even if your opponents go to the other bomb site, you'll be able to save all of your weapons and use them in the next round instead of having to potentially eco or have to consider force buying. Gamble stacks should generally be done after an initial default where your opponent has some sort of info or read on your setup, and then you rotate over and stack the site that you think they're going to hit based off of previous rounds. For example, if you know that they regroup and hit Beyond Inferno every round after defaulting, you show the same resistance at A early on in the round, same resistance as you normally do, and you quietly shift over to B before the enemy initiates their execute. Gamble stacks are also very useful when the enemy sees your op somewhere. Instantly shifting over to the other bomb site after getting an early kill with an op is a great way to catch your enemy that are saying, "Their op is B, let's go A." Gamble stacks are also really good to do if you are 1 or 2 players down and the situation is a 3-on-4, 4-on-5, 3-on-5, or similar. The reason being that your opponent expects you to be split 1-1-1 or 2-1 or 2-2. If you have 4 alive, then they'll regroup and hit what they think is a weakest. Taking risks in clutches is what separates good clutch players from bad ones. The single most important thing to consider during clutches is that you cannot account for every possible situation or scenario, and you need to act with instinct, conviction, confidence, and all of this instantly. Taking the risks that players are going to be in certain positions and taking early fights are things that are necessary to turn an unfavorable situation around. If your opponent plays the round absolutely perfect, then there is close to no way for you to win the round. You need to make sure that when your opponent makes a mistake, you're capitalizing off of it. You're making sure that the angles that you take are untradeable. If your opponent's group and they're split, then you are repositioning. Successful clutches come from an inner peace and instinct. The more you think about a situation is when your thoughts will deceive you. You do not have to clear every angle because there are too many angles to clear. You do not have to go by the book like a normal round because safe is too slow and too predictable. Pushing through smokes and early flanking is probably the hardest part of calculated risks to talk about. This, similar to clutching, relies on instinct and confidence to pull off. If you're considering pushing through a smoke grenade, you need to consider, is it your smoke or is it the enemy's smoke? Smoke grenades are done in certain locations and at certain times and have certain tells. If I'm smoking off an area, it can mean that I don't want you to come through it because I'm alone and my buddies aren't close to me. It can mean I don't want you to have info on my next play, and that might be to leave the area completely. Knowing your opponent will help you the most in making a calculated risk to push through the smoke. Later in the halves of games or in overtime is where you will see these types of plays happening most commonly, though I'm sure there are loads of players that like to start off the game by pushing through a smoke randomly thinking it's a next-gen idea. It's not. It'll get punished more times than not, that's why it's called a risk. The calculated part of the risk is knowing that it's a risk and doing it anyways because you're visualizing what your opponents are doing and you have the confidence that you know what might or might not be behind that smoke. There are several ways to push through a smoke, including walk pushing silently, getting your teammates to flash you through it, or straight balls to the wall running through it. When deciding if you want to go through the smoke, you need to ask yourself, why am I doing this push? Is it for info, early flank potential, and calculate whether or not potentially getting punished for the play is worth it. Early flanking can happen frequently after pushing through a smoke either as a T or a CT. Knowing what to do at this point comes down to individual decision making, but generally speaking, I like to contain my opponents in an area as a CT and funnel them into a stacked bomb site. Not gamble stacked anymore, since we have the info on what they're doing. Containing means that I'm going to stop my flank at a certain threshold where my enemy has to either commit into my team's stacked bomb site or they have to run back into my crosshair. I'm not committing to a flank where they can kill me and now my team loses all info and map control and has to decide on unstacking the bomb site. I hope this episode of the Training Room has helped you with understanding calculated risks. Be sure to check out other Training Room videos just like this one by clicking through the link in the description. The Training Room is a hub that provides advanced tips for advanced gamers.